Good morning and welcome to CNN Newsroom, live from Hong Kong.
Hello and thank you so much for joining us. It is 7 a.m. on Friday, March 21st here in Hong Kong. Happy Friday to you. Here's a look at the view across Victoria Harbour. We certainly have a lot going on this morning, so we're going to get right to our headlines. Happening now, an Orion airplane from the Australian Air Force is resuming its search for any trace of that missing Malaysian jetliner. A Norwegian ship has been searching through the night after satellites spotted debris in a remote corner of the Indian Ocean. We'll have much more on that story in a moment. YouTube video purports to show pro-Russian forces smashing their way into a Ukrainian military base in western Crimea. It happened as Russian lawmakers voted overwhelmingly to annex the territory. U.S. President Barack Obama announced sanctions against 20 prominent Russians. Moscow slapped sanctions on 9 U.S. lawmakers. Afghan officials say Taliban militants stormed a police station in the eastern city of Jalalabad, triggering a fierce gun battle. At least 11 people were killed, as well as 6 attackers. The Taliban have promised a campaign of violence to try to disrupt next month's presidential election. A controversial anti-gay pastor in the U.S., famous for protesting at military funerals, has died. His supporters say all of the world's natural and man-made disasters are God's punishment for America's acceptance of homosexuality. Phelps and his family often picketed military funerals with signs reading, quote, "Thank God for dead soldiers." Let's take a look now at Wall Street, and you can see that U.S. stocks rallied as worries over interest rates eased and investors were greeted with some positive economic news. At the close, the Dow had erased almost all of the previous day's losses, and here's a look at those numbers. You can see the Dow is up 108 points there, the Nasdaq up a little over 0.25%, and the broader market, the S&P 500, is up 0.6%. Let's go back now to our top story. The air search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is ramping up again in one of the most isolated places in the world, the South Indian Ocean. One Orion aircraft deployed before dawn and another will take off in about an hour. Now, these images of the search came in just minutes ago. Earlier, under the cover of night, the crew of a Norwegian ship used lights and binoculars to scour the seas. But the clock is ticking. The batteries on the flight data and voice recorders go dead after about 30 days. CNN's Jim Sciutto tells us more about these objects spotted at sea by satellite.
From miles up in space, a possible breakthrough in the search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Australia says these satellite images of 2 objects floating in the southern Indian Ocean, 1,500 miles off the Australian coast, could be part of the missing jet. One object is 18 feet across, the other 79 feet, and surrounded by smaller pieces of debris. They were located 14 miles apart and just southeast of the main search area as now defined by U.S. and Australian analysis.
It is credible enough to divert the research to this area on the basis it provides a promising lead to what might be wreckage from the debris field.
It is probably the best lead we have right now, but we need to get there, find them, see them, assess them to know whether it's really meaningful or not.
Officials caution the debris could just be ocean garbage or containers fallen off ships. Still, the U.S. and Australia immediately sent advanced surveillance aircraft. So far, the debris still has not been located.
Poor visibility has been reported, and this will hamper both air and satellite efforts. AMSA continues to hold grave concerns for the passengers and crew on board.
These new clues are leading to a redirection of resources from the northern corridor to the southern one. China announced it is sending 9 Navy ships to the southern Indian Ocean. In total, 4 out of 5 aircraft involved in the search effort are now in the south or heading south. The search for clues from the flight crew could also soon turn up new leads. FBI investigators tell CNN they are confident they can retrieve deleted information from the pilot's flight simulator and his co-pilot's computers. An unprecedented international force is now converging on the southern Indian Ocean, among them an Australian warship that would be able to recover debris if it turns out it is part of the plane. The Australians say they are also studying new satellite data, which they hope will give them a clearer picture of what the debris actually is. Jim Sciutto, CNN, Washington.
Now, the weather could create some big challenges for crews searching off the Australian coast. Ocean conditions, weather and currents will all make it difficult to find any debris. Now, Tom Sater joins us from the World Weather Center with that part of the story. So, Tom, tell us some more about these challenges that the searchers are facing.
Well, it seems like, Patricia, every third day or so, cold fronts move through that region, and they sweep up from the south. They kick up the winds, which kicks up the seas, and the currents pick up in speed as well. We can get sea heights that range from 1 meter to over 3, and most likely we have another front on its way. The good news is we have this Norwegian vessel in the area. If this turns out to be the debris, this is going to become a city. Not just this vessel, but several of them. There will be hundreds of people that are going to be working in this area, so that's a full operation in itself. When you talk about the distance from Perth, again, this is a good 5 hours or so just for these planes to move out in this area. It only gives them maybe 2 or 3 hours of investigation time before they fly back, so they're going to continue to do this. So the weather is important, not just in the area of concern, but in and out of the Royal Australian Air Force, and that's in Pearce. More on this in a minute. Most of the stronger currents are south of where these debris pictures were taken, which is good news. It moves from west to east. It's pretty strong. It's generally in an area of smaller and weaker currents. We figure this debris moving maybe 20 or 30 centimeters per second. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add it hour by hour and day by day, it does add up. And then you toss in these frontal systems. Here's a front that has moved through the area. There is a good window here in the next 24 to 48 hours before the next front moves in. Our exclusive forecast models here show here that the rain moving in along our next frontal system, which will be moving in about Saturday night into Sunday. The winds along with this front are quite potent. Again, coming up from the south-southwest. So this will kick up the seas, which again could move any debris. And again, that'll be a west to east fashion. As we take a look at what is happening with this next frontal system, again, it'll calm down back behind that, but it's also what's happening out of Perth. Currently winds 26 kilometers per hour. We had thunderstorms for the crews flying out. Just 35 kilometers to the north is where we have the Royal Australian Air Force. As they continue to move in and out of this region, thunderstorms they can handle. They can get up and above. But what happens once they fly into this area? They want to continue to try to track what is already some lost time. So let me show you what happens when they drop these radio sounds from the sky. This is incredible technology. As they deploy these, they enter the surface. You'll see it here kind of exit this plane. This is what actually happens when they run these kind of sorties. What happens is as this buoy runs down, this radio sound, it will open up and expand. Watch it as it sinks and almost becomes this sort of jellyfish, if you will. As it expands like an umbrella, it will measure the currents. Not just at the surface, but down below. It will record the temperature. This is all important because once we have these radio sounds in the water, we can detect and track the movement for the crews, for the vessels, for the all of the, of course, aircraft that'll be in this area. They need to know exactly not just what's happening on the surface, but again, anything that could move vertically to a depth that could be 2 to 3 kilometers in depth. And that's when the Poseidon crews and the patrol squadrons move in from above. A lot going on, and of course, all this goes on a hope that if this is the material and, of course, the debris we're watching, Patricia.
Exactly, Tom. Thank you for that. Now, as Tom mentioned, it's a very big if that those objects spotted are part of the plane's debris. But if indeed it is, one thing they are going to be searching for, the cockpit and the voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Now, both of those are sending out pings, but as CNN's Renee Marsh shows us, those signals will only be emitted for a couple more weeks.
These two objects in the Indian Ocean may be the best hint yet at what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. But even if they are from the missing plane, the real key to understanding what happened could still be miles away at the bottom of the ocean, and it's calling. But time is running out.
So the minute this is no longer broadcasting, things become much more difficult.
The cockpit voice recorder stores at least 2 hours of audio, and the data recorder contains at least 36 hours of instrument data, both crucial to understanding what happened. Transmitters on the recorder send out a locating tone, but that only lasts for 30 days. Malaysian officials say without the pings, they don't have the technology to find them on their own.
Looking about submarine technology. And then before that becomes an issue, let me tell you that the Malaysian submarines do not have that technology.
If the plane is in the water, the recorders may have sunk far from where any debris on the surface drifted. The water in the southern Indian Ocean can be 13,000 feet deep, more than 10 times the height of the Empire State Building.
It becomes a situation of trying to hear a very tiny signal in a really complex background noise. And that's a hard problem no matter what, made only worse by this being very deep, which makes the signal lower.
These tones can be heard from 2 miles away, but only by using special underwater listening devices. Planes even drop buoys like these to help listen. One bit of good news, the data on the boxes is preserved long after the pingers go silent. It took 2 years before investigators found the recorders belonging to Air France Flight 447 on the bottom of the Atlantic. The data was still there. But even if they do find them in this case, since the cockpit voice recorder is only 2 hours long, there's no guarantee it will answer every question as to what happened to Flight 370. Well, one major manufacturer of pingers tells CNN that since the crash of Air France Flight 447, there's been a push to require pingers be attached to the body of the plane, not just the black boxes. Now, those pingers would be required to have a range of 6 to 10 nautical miles. That's much further than the current 2 nautical miles. And the minimum battery life would be extended to 90 days instead of 30. And these proposed rules would only apply to newly manufactured planes. Renee Marsh, CNN, Washington.
We will have more on the mysterious disappearance of Flight 370 coming up at the half hour as investigators scramble to reach what could be wreckage from that missing jetliner. We look at another theory that could explain why the plane went down, what's being called the zombie plane scenario. But first, as